We are live. Coming to you live. It's Lichtman Live. Say what's up to the people, Dad.
Hey, everyone out there. Good to see you, even though I can't see you.
You can't see them at all. You can't see a single one of them, actually.
I see you.
How do I look?
So you like the universal person.
I represent the viewers.
Yes, you do.
I take the viewers, channel them through me, and then to you, and then you talk to the viewers. We're like a funnel system, right?
Correct.
I want to say hello to the people in chat. Hello, Joshua D. Hello, Angry Chicken, David Albine, Linda Fusco, Elemental Bot, Ross Goldberg, MPV314, Patrick Murray, Andrew RBC, Vaylander. Hello, everybody.
We have any presidents?
I haven't seen any presidents yet.
Oh, wow. Usually we have our presidents.
I want to shout out our new members in the chat. Barry Smith, Andrew, Patrick Murray, Guy 2015, Barry Smith. I think I already said that.
We did.
If you didn't see our post, everybody, we are switching the channel to a membership-based channel. Now, all you got to do is press the join button in YouTube. Pick one of your tiers. We have 2 tiers. And you can become a member. And there are great perks with the members. And we were thinking about it. And instead of relying the whole chat on donations, we thought we would switch it over to a member-based channel. It makes it easier for you all. It makes it easier for us. But you have to sign up for a membership to sustain the channel.
But they can still donate, too.
You can still donate if you want.
We want you to.
If the basic membership is $4.99, Dad, so it's cheaper than a caramel macchiato at Starbucks. Okay.
No kidding.
So
it's the best deal in town.
Yeah,
in any town.
And we're gonna make sure that members, the big perk with members, there's lots of perks. You can see them in the join button, but the main perk is that we're gonna let the members have priority on the questions.
Doesn't mean we won't answer other questions.
No, it doesn't mean we won't answer other questions. Yes.
But for $4.99, you get questions that my students pay thousands of dollars to ask at American University.
Think about that. Think about the price of tuition it costs to take this man's class.
Yes, exactly.
And, look, we thought, not everybody can donate every week. And this also gives us a more sustainable stream of income. We want to grow the channel. We need resources to do that. We want to be able to put our time and effort into this channel. Look, we need to make money, guys. It's America, right? You got to make money. So we thought this is the best way for us, for you guys, for the channel.
But still donate.
If you want to donate, you can still donate. We'll still read your question. But for those who are members, you also get priority. So you don't have to donate to get priority anymore. People are saying I can't see the join button. It should be on our main channel. If people in the chat know where it is, let them know. Anyways, let's get past that for now, Dad. You made some news this week, Dad. You yourself, historian Allan Lichtman. Yes, you wrote, Dad, an amicus brief to the Supreme Court. You and 24 other historians.
Yes, it wasn't just me.
Right. Supporting Trump being disqualified for running for president. So before we get into that, Dad, the first thing I thought when I saw that was, I don't even know what an amicus brief is. So tell us what an amicus brief is.
Amicus is friend of the court. That is, those who have some expertise, like 25 historians, file a document, a brief that's submitted to the Supreme Court that is designed to give the court information and analysis to help them reach their ultimate decision. An amicus brief does not define the ultimate decision, but gives the court help in reaching its decision through expertise that the justices themselves do not necessarily have. They're not historians.
Thank you for that. For example. But you are a historian. So, Dad, tell the chat, tell everybody watching why you think, as a historian, Trump should be disqualified, taken off the ballot.
Yeah. Let me clarify. Our friends of the court brief, the amicus, does not jump to the ultimate conclusion that Trump should be excluded. but rather we provide the court with analyses which, if they accept, would likely lead them to their legal conclusion that Trump should be bounced from the ballot. It's a critical distinction. We are providing the court with the information they need, which, if they accept, could facilitate a decision that would bounce Trump from the ballot. But we don't explicitly take that position. We are focused on providing the court historical evidence and analysis. And we address three critical issues that are central to the question of whether Trump should be bounced from the ballot under what is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, passed by Congress in 1866, ratified by the states in 1868. And Section 3, it's a long section, I'll boil it down. It says, if you have previously sworn an oath to support the Constitution, you are then disqualified from becoming an officer of the United States. And so we address critical questions. Number one, is the president covered under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, the disqualification clause, even though the president is not explicitly mentioned in Section 3? And we find in the affirmative clearly. That issue was directly addressed. And remember, the originalists, the conservatives on the Supreme Court, they have indicated that to them what is most important is what the original framers of the Constitution understood their amendment or article to mean. And the issue of whether the president was covered was explicitly raised during the debates over passage of the 14th Amendment. Senator from my home state, your previous home state of Maryland, Reverend Johnson, a Democrat who was against the 14th Amendment, raised the issue. He said, look, the president isn't covered. Why'd you leave out the president? And Senator Lott Morrill, a major supporter of Reconstruction in the 14th Amendment, said, oh, no, you're wrong. The president is covered as an officer of the United States. And Senator Johnson admitted, oh, you're right. I was wrong. The president is covered, and no senator arose to challenge that. A few years later, Congress passed what was called an amnesty bill, relieving some ex-Confederates from disqualification under Section 3. And they explicitly did not include former president of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, under amnesty because they understood that he had been disqualified to run for president under Section 3, which covered the president. But if they gave him amnesty from Section 3, he would then be free to run for president of the U.S. Second point we made was that the Section 3 was not just designed to punish former Confederates, but was designed to last in perpetuity to guard against future insurrections. Again, that issue was explicitly raised during debates, and framers said, yes, we put this in the Constitution to make it permanent, unlike a statute, which could be changed. And they rejected versions of Section 3 that would have limited its time. Finally, we also found that Section 3 is self-executing. It does not require an additional act of Congress or any conviction in the court. Of the thousands of Confederates that were instantly disqualified under Section 3, former Confederates, none of them were disqualified under an act of Congress or a criminal conviction. In fact, Jefferson Davis admitted that he was disqualified from running for the president of the U.S. the moment that the 14th Amendment was ratified by the states, and tried to use that disqualification to quash his criminal prosecution for treason, claiming it would have been double jeopardy. These were the central arguments made by the opponents of the Colorado decision, bouncing Trump from the ballot, and we believe that we really shredded those claims.
Shred them up, shred them up, shred them
Shred
up,
them up.
shred them up.
And we've had, I think, 8 or 9 media hits, places like the New York Times, MSNBC, the Daily Beast, the Guardian, the Huff Post, all of them very, very positive about our brief.
Here's a question. I'm gonna pose a couple questions for you that I've been hearing.
Yes.
Why not just let the people decide? Trump will be
Yes.
on the ballot. Why not just
Yes.
let the people vote?
Yes, that's a non sequitur. The people don't vote on those who are constitutionally disqualified. That occurs prior to anyone actually running for office. If you were to run for president, Sam, the people wouldn't decide. You'd be automatically disqualified because you're too young. No different than being automatically disqualified because you were an insurrectionist. And I remind everyone, who was it? It's a pop quiz for you, Sam, that for 5 years mongered the false view that Barack Obama was disqualified from being president because supposedly he was born in Africa, not in the United States. Who pushed that for 5 years?
Donald J. Trump.
Exactly. And now somehow they've stood that all on its head and say, oh, we just need to disregard constitutional disqualifications, just let it go to the ballot. That's not how the Constitution works. And let me remind everybody too, for decades and more, it was conservatives who claimed to be the upholders of the strict construction of the Constitution. And now they seem again to be taking an opposite position when it comes to the strict construction of Section 3.
But aren't you putting your finger on the scale of democracy a little bit? Just like Trump tried to put his whole fist on the scale of democracy, aren't you, by taking him out, again, shifting the scales of democracy a bit?
No, this is what democracy is all about. We are a constitutional democracy. And the first order of a constitutional democracy is that you follow the rules set by the Constitution. And the rules under Section 3 are no different than the rules which say you can't run if you're not of age, you haven't resided 14 consecutive years in the US, you're not a natural born citizen. No one is suggesting that disqualifications under those criteria somehow undermine democracy, nor does disqualification under Section 3. And I haven't mentioned, there is a 4th section to our brief. After amnesty, although a few ex-Confederate leaders like Jeff Davis weren't covered, most ex-Confederates were covered, and many of them went back into government, became leaders of the post-Reconstruction white supremacist governments in the South. And what did they do? They snuffed out Black voting, even though they were now privileged to vote and hold office. They used things like intimidation, violence, the white primary, the poll tax, the literacy test to wipe out Black voting and office holding, and to impose the whole system of Jim Crow segregation and discrimination. So historical experience also suggests there is good reason for disqualifying insurrectionists. Quite frankly, better reason than disqualifying someone because they're 34 rather than 35 years old.
Yeah, but when you're 34, you're totally immature to be president. But when you're 35, you're totally ready.
The switch flips.
Yeah. Again, I want to pose you another question that I've been hearing from a lot of folks on the right. But I'm hearing a lot of people say that Trump himself was not really involved in an insurrection.
Yeah. Neither was Jefferson Davis. He wasn't on the front lines. A lot of judges who are ex-Confederates were disqualified. They were not on the front lines, and they weren't even directing, but they were involved in the insurrection. And while Trump was not breaching the Capitol, certainly he wanted to, he tried, he waited 3 hours while the violence and the insurrection took place, and his commander-in-chief did nothing about it, incited it. tried to overturn our democracy with fake electors, with pressures on election officials. And by the way, even the lower court in Colorado that said he shouldn't be disqualified found that he had committed an insurrection. In fact, every court that's looked at this, whether they've disqualified or not, agreed that he was part of the insurrection. You don't have to be part of the violence to be an insurrectionist. And the whole history of insurrections makes that crystal clear.
Terry Green asks, if Trump is disqualified, do you think he will tell his supporters not to vote out of spite?
Very possibly. You know, he has no loyalty to anyone but himself. And if he is disqualified, he may say, you know, let's go home, just out of spite. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that certainly could happen. Now, look, I'm not predicting that the Supreme Court's going to uphold his disqualification. It's very, very hard to predict what courts are going to do. And my suspicion is they'll try to dodge the issue and are not somehow going to find a narrow way of saying he's not disqualified. But who knows?
Well, that was the next question from new member Theo Meal. They said, what % chance would you give that Trump is actually disqualified? Give us a % chance.
25%, I would say. Overwhelmingly, I believe that they probably won't address the big issues that our brief addresses, but will find some narrow way of keeping Trump on the ballot. That's my guess.
Right.
You take it for what it's worth. Don't bet your house and your dog on it.
Right.
Especially.
I think our first member ever, Andrew, I think I saw him become our first member ever. He says, do you expect another desperate attempt of insurrection if Trump loses and or faces prison?
I have no doubt if Trump loses, he will not accept the results. And once again, will do everything in his power to try to overturn them, including insurrection. There's one big difference, though. He's not president, doesn't have the power of the federal government or the prestige or the platform behind him the way he did in 2020. And so that makes me a little more sanguine that he's really not going to be able to do much to steal back the election.
I agree. Let's see here. Is it true family members of Confederates that didn't participate were disqualified because they gave quote unquote aid?
If you gave aid to the insurrection, you could be disqualified. That is correct. It's case by case basis, but yes.
NF wants to know, how can an insurrection...
Again, that presumes you had previously sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution.
Right.
And not too many spouses have done that since women didn't vote or hold office in those days.
Right. NF wants to know, how can an insurrection happen without guns?
140 police officers were injured without guns. 5 people died without guns. Guns are not the only weapon. They had poles and flagpoles, and they grabbed fire extinguishers, and they had various kinds of sprays. All those things injured people, and in some cases ultimately resulted in death. Insurrections can take place in many different ways. I would also say, not just the Capitol assault, but other things that Trump did were also an insurrection, an attempt to overturn our democracy. For example, by sponsoring fake slates of electors pledged to Donald Trump to overturn the election.
I want to give a shout out to some new members who have joined during the live stream. Rise Armati as a new member. Thank you so much. Jack Tioli, new member. Captain M90s as a new member. Thank you, guys. We are moving to a membership-based channel. So thank you to all who have joined. Right, Dad?
Right, but doesn't mean you can't come on, doesn't mean you can't ask questions, and doesn't mean you can't donate.
Right, it's still totally free to watch and interact with the channel. right, Dad?
Absolutely. In every way. And we'll answer every question we possibly can.
Starry's asked, does winning more keys equal winning more states?
Typically, yes, but I don't really get into that a great deal. My bottom line is what really matters is who's going to win. And that's what I provide. Unlike a lot of the pollsters who, give you these phony probabilities, like Nate Silver said, 80% chance Hillary Clinton would win. Then when she loses, he says, see, I told you there was a 20% chance she would lose. So he can never be wrong, but he can never be right either. And I know if I'm ever wrong, there'll be lots of people ready to bury me, Sam.
Including me.
Including you, I know.
David Albine asks, Professor, with the delay of the appeals court decision regarding immunity, do you think his trial gets delayed? And if so, by how long?
It's a very difficult question to answer because there's so many variables. No question his trial is going to be delayed. I don't think the critical factor in the delay, though, is the Court of Appeals decision. I think that'll come within the next week. The critical thing is, A, will the full DC Court of Appeals take the case, which will be another major delay. And then the most important question is, will the Supreme Court take the case, which could delay it until after the election, depending on whether they put it on the rocket docket or, decide to hear it at the beginning of their October term. So there's so much up in the air. My own suspicion, it's just a guess, I have no inside information, the DC 3-judge panel will unanimously rule that he's not immune. The full circuit will not take the case. They'll stick with the 3-judge panel, and ultimately the Supreme Court will not take the case, because I don't think the Supreme Court, they don't particularly like, as we saw in 2020, getting involved in these electoral disputes. That's just a guess.
Carlos Alvarez says, question, heard about crime dropping after Texas allowed people to carry handguns without a permit. Any thoughts?
I haven't heard about that, but I know this. States with the loosest gun control laws, like Texas, have more than double the gun murder rate of states like Massachusetts and Connecticut with the strictest gun control laws. The correlation is overwhelming. In addition, if Governor Abbott and the gun lobby were right about the need for the loosest possible gun control laws, then the United States should be by far the safest nation from gun violence of any of our peer democracies. And in fact, the opposite is true. When you compare the US to our closest peers, the G7 group of nations, which are nations like Canada and UK, France, Germany, Italy, plus Australia, an American per capita is 20 times more likely to be murdered by a gun than a resident of one of those countries. Not 20%, 20 times. These statistics are laid out in my book, Repeal the Second Amendment, The Case for a Safer America.
Kiko agrees, my dog.
Yeah, no, I rarely get applause from Kiko. That was good.
Member Patrick Murray asked a question about Trump running again in 2028. Patrick, we've talked about this. He'll be too old, most likely. I think my dad has
most likely, yeah. He's not in the greatest shape as it is, and he doesn't have the most healthy lifestyle. And if he loses this time, no way they're going to turn to him in 2028. Plus, if he loses, then all those cases are going to go forward. Only if he gets elected president can he stop any of them. If he's not elected, if he's just a private citizen, all 4 cases that are up against him are going to go forward.
Captain M90s, who became a member this, yeah, and he became a member this stream. They ask, will U.S. military casualties in Jordan turn the foreign policy failure key? Not
3 alone. There have been far more casualties under Trump than so far under Biden. But if in fact, things get much worse in the Middle East and the American casualties do start to pile up, then yes, that could turn the key, but not yet.
Jack Tioli asks, hi, Professor. If Russia were to advance more ground on Ukraine, is there still a chance it wouldn't be a foreign policy failure?
Again, it would depend. I don't like to answer hypotheticals. It depend on the exact circumstance, but certainly would not bode well for holding the foreign policy failure key.
Right, that is. Let me lost my place. Say something funny, Dad.
Skimdy Vindy.
Not that funny.
Sneezer, snoozer, Snyder.
Really?
Yeah, how about that?
It's somewhat funny. Ben Weinberg asks, how can you be sure the Supreme Court will disqualify Trump? We can't be sure, Ben.
I'm not. I said 75%. I don't think they will.
Right.
I think there's a small chance that they might, but again, I'm guessing. I have no inside information. Very hard to predict what courts will do, but I know Supreme Court in 2020 was very reluctant to get involved in electoral disputes. So I think they'll find some narrow technical grounds for slipping by this and letting Trump stay in the ballot.
Mike,
but that's a guess.
Why you keep doing that to me when I start talking?
Hey, I'm an old man. Things come to me intermittently,
Right. Mike DeNicola just became a member, Dad. Say thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Easy Attack. Tim Lawrence also just became members. Thank you guys so much.
We really need it.
Let's see here. Now with the members and the donos and the regular questions, it's harder for me actually. There's so much I have to follow. Those, right? Yeah. All right.
And you want to be president, huh?
Who said that?
Oh.
What is your take on the removal of Thomas Jefferson's statue and maybe even Washington? That's by H.V. Bart.
Yeah, I certainly favor removing the ex-Confederate statutes. No question. They fought a war to uphold slavery. I don't think you should be removing Jefferson and Washington, but that's just my personal opinion.
Barry Smith asks, is Fani Willis's case doomed or will it survive her possible scandal?
What she did reminds me of what the great attorney Clarence Darrow said to William Jennings Bryan during his cross-examination in the famous Scopes monkey trial in the 1920s. He said, Bryan, I don't know what you're thinking when you do think. Fani Willis, I don't know what you're thinking when you do think about this. This was coruscatingly stupid. You should have known this was going to come out. You should have known how bad this looks. I can't imagine someone as experienced, as knowledgeable, as savvy as you could make this fundamental mistake. It looks terrible. That said, it's not illegal. I don't think it's grounds for bouncing her out of the prosecution. I don't think the judge will. I think it's very bad PR, but I don't think it'll derail the case.
Nietzsche asks, does third party have charisma for key? RFK Jr. because his name, most Americans are ignorant of history. What do Muslims play in this election given Gaza? I think we've talked about most of that before.
Yeah, I want to mention one thing though. There have been some recent polls that came out today. And remember how, Democrats and the pundits were in panic over Trump leading in the polls. Well, the latest poll had Biden ahead by 6 points, came out today. And at least within the polling data, what group do you think shifted away from Trump and towards Biden? It's the biggest group in the electorate.
Women.
Yes, women are now.
I think you've asked that before, so that might have been a little cheating for me.
All right, but whatever. Women are now overwhelmingly voting for Biden over Trump. And the interesting thing that I find very puzzling and almost never happens if you throw in Kennedy, Biden actually does a little better than when it's just head to head against Trump. So, I'm really puzzled about how the third party key is ultimately going to shake out, but it's something to keep your eye on.
Alex Shim asks, how can all 50 states disqualify Trump from the ballot since all 50 states do not agree that Trump engaged in an insurrection? Well, these are state by state cases, right, Dad?
Right. He would be disqualified state by state. And, obviously it would depend on what the Supreme Court rules. In the extreme, which I think is 1%, Supreme Court said, you can't be on any ballot. You're disqualified for running for president, period. It's a constitutional matter, and the Constitution overrides anything in the state. So again, if you tried to run for president, Sam, you would be automatically disqualified everywhere. It wouldn't be a matter of each state having to make a decision. If Arnold Schwarzenegger wanted to run for president, right, he'd be disqualified everywhere. You wouldn't have to go state by state. And you know why Arnold Schwarzenegger would be disqualified?
Because he was born in Austria.
You're hitting 100% tonight.
Thank you.
No froggy.
Do you think that strong economy, GOP disorder, and Trump conviction may finally accumulate in the electoral upset like Biden victory in Texas?
No. I've been following Texas politics forever, and for 20 years, people have been telling me Texas is going to turn purple because of the Hispanic vote. Once Hispanics keep growing and start to turn out and become citizens, it's going to change things in Texas. Well, it hasn't, in part because Hispanic turnout is still very low, and Democrats do not necessarily overwhelmingly win the Hispanic vote in Texas. So no, I'd be really surprised if Texas turned purple.
A lot of Hispanic Americans are very conservative. I mean, there's this conspiracy theory among like right-wing media hosts that say like, oh, Democrats want open borders because they come here and then they become citizens and then they vote for Democrats. And it's like, that's not true. There's a lot of...
It's basically true, but not overwhelmingly. Same thing with the Muslims. Did I talk about this statistic I saw on CNN today about Muslims in Michigan? So they have this Chiron, which says, Biden wins Michigan by about 150,000 votes, 146,000 Muslims voted. So, Biden loses the Muslim vote, he could lose Michigan. What's the fallacy of that? Not every Muslim voted for Biden. It's not 146,000 votes. Maybe it's 60-40, 65-35. So you're talking more like 30 to 40,000 net votes that are at stake here, not 146,000.
You said that that's basically true, that Hispanics come to the country and then vote Democrat. But, I mean, look at a state like Florida. I mean, Cubans might have even won Florida for Trump, right?
Cubans are the one exception, particularly the older generation of Cubans. But aside from Cubans, the Hispanic vote is about 2/3 Democratic, not overwhelmingly like African Americans who are 90%, but more likely than not.
One of our new members, Easy Attack, said, Dr. Chris Ely from Cal Fullerton. I guess that's they're saying that's who they are. They are Dr. Chris Ely from Cal Fullerton.
Oh, nice.
Well, welcome, Dr. Chris Ely from Cal Fullerton. Yeah. Guy 2015 says, hi, Professor Lichtman. Why did you give Obama the Challenger Charisma key in 2008, but not the Incumbent Charisma key in 2012?
Yes, very good question. In 2008, he was this extraordinary, new, fresh, exciting president. And then once he becomes president, he got victimized by the most common phenomenon in Washington, and that is you get caught in the Washington bubble. You start to listen to the pollsters and the handlers and the consultants and the admin, and they bring you down into the lowest common denominator. And we saw that with his disastrous performance in the first presidential debate against Mitt Romney. He did recover, but he never recovered the magic that he had in 2008. Yeah, and by the way, if you want to read up on this, my favorite book on the presidency, it's very old. It's written by George Reedy, Lyndon Johnson's press secretary. It's called The Twilight of the Presidency, and it talks about what happens to presidents when they get caught in this Washington bubble.
You live in Washington. Are you in a bubble?
I'm not a president.
Oh, good point.
Nobody cares what I do.
President Belichick,
all right.
President in the chat says 2024 quarter one GDP forecast currently at 4%. So that would be good for Biden, right?
Very good for Biden.
The U.S. economy has grown 3% last year. Recession is becoming less likely every month. If it's evident Biden secures both economic keys, will you possibly make an early prediction?
Possibly. Not right away, but, I may make it before. Last time I made it in early August. I might make this one in early July. Again, economy is very volatile. The economists don't, I'm not going to give my old joke about economists that I've done about 10 times on this show, but economists don't agree with one another. So I want to give it a little more time.
As of right now, where do the keys stand?
They don't. I mean, there are too many keys in flux to make a judgment as to where the key. We know where a few of them stand. Obviously, Biden has lost the mandate key because they lost seats in the House. He loses the incumbent charisma key. He wins the incumbency key, the party battle key, the challenger charisma key, and the policy change key. All the others could change over the next few months.
Assuming SCOTUS declines to hear it, what is your instinct on how long they'll delay on answering before Chutkan takes it back? Judge Chutkan.
Yeah, if who doesn't hear it? I didn't quite catch that.
SCOTUS, Supreme Court.
Oh, then I think you're going to get a trial probably in May.
Okay, that was a short and sweet answer. That was a short and sweet answer.
Yep.
David Packween, a new member. Thank you so much, David. Dad, we just got 50. We got a donation of 50 Danish krona.
Wow.
What do you know about Danish krona?
Nothing.
I don't know anything about Danish krona either.
I haven't been in Denmark since the 60s.
You were alive in the 60s?
I was alive in the 40s.
Oh, that's crazy. Whoa, holy cow. Do you think, as I do, Biden will federalize the National Guard in Texas? And if so, do you fear a Waco-like response? And could that hurt Biden?
Yeah, I think it's a very volatile situation in Texas. I think Biden should exercise as much forbearance as he possibly can. I think the Republicans are trying to bait him into an overreaction and hoping you get a Waco type situation, which was under Bill Clinton, where law enforcement attacked this compound of the Branch Davidian cult and dozens of people were killed in the process.
What's your take on what's happening right now with the border and this deal? I mean, it seems there's an old Key and Peele sketch where I think Michael, or one of the guys, plays Obama, and he's in a room with a bunch of Republicans, and he tells them, maybe and he tells them exactly what they want to hear. And they go, wait, well, I don't know. It seems like Republicans are finally getting what they want, and they're backtracking, like one of the most slimiest moves in politics I've seen in forever, just to protect Trump's reelection, right?
I think it's the most cynical thing I've seen in politics, maybe since Watergate or even before. Republicans have been screaming, we're not going to give aid to Ukraine and Israel without a border deal. And it looks like they have a bipartisan border deal. So what is Trump and his allies doing? Scuttling the bipartisan border deal. Trump says it's a bad deal. He hasn't even seen the details of the deal. And of course, he has no better proposal. But leave that aside. What Republicans have clearly shown is they don't want to solve the issues on the border. They want to maintain chaos on the border in order to use that as a club against Joe Biden and the Democrats. The hypocrisy is thick enough to cut with a spoon. Hypocrisy has, no shortage in Washington. But even for Washington, this is an extraordinary, cynical move showing Donald Trump and his allies care only about grabbing power and nothing about the American people.
How do people not see through that? Like, I don't get how that doesn't cause millions of Americans to look at this and say, wait a second, these people who said that they were, going to protect me, that they were going to increase border security are now just not doing it. And now I need to find new candidates to support.
People may, this is brand new. The bill hasn't even been revealed yet. And I think, the Democrats are going to pound on this issue. And let's not forget, while presidential elections have a certain logic, an independent logic, lots of other elections are up. Every member of the House, a third of the Senate, governors, members of state legislatures. And whether or not these issues turn the presidential election, they could have a massive impact on every other contest.
That's a fair point, Dad. Given that the 2016 election was difficult to call using the keys, do you think the 2024 election will be just as difficult to call?
I don't. I mean, obviously, depends upon events over the next few months, but so far it does not look like it's going to be quite as difficult as the 2024. It'll look more like 2020 when I made prediction in early August, as opposed to a month and a half later for my prediction in 2016.
Drava Krishna asks, Professor, I've been following you for years. Your prophecies are like those of Nostradamus. You think that's true, Dad? You think you're Nostradamus?
What's that?
You think you're Nostradamus?
I have never portrayed myself as Nostradamus, but others have. I can't stop them.
Well, Mr. Krishna asks, why is Vice President Harris so unpopular? Would she make a good president if she became one?
I think she'd make a perfectly good president. She's very smart. She's very experienced. She was Attorney General in California, United States Senator, now a vice president. I think in part the whole administration has been unpopular, at least after the first year, and I think that rubs off on Kamala Harris. I also, quite frankly, think there is, a lot of sentiment against a woman and against a person of color, and that has affected, at least for some, public perceptions of Harris.
What do you know about the party systems? Are we now in the 7th party system?
Very good question. I'm not a big fan of the party systems. Obviously you had a new party system after the Whigs imploded in the 1850s, and you got Republicans versus Democrats. Some say you got a new political system when Franklin Roosevelt won in 1932 and established the Roosevelt Coalition. It's not clear that there's been a new political system since then. Both Republicans and Democrats since the 30s have been up and down, certainly in the presidency, just about in equilibrium. So I'm not sure that old idea of party systems works in the late 20th and 21st centuries.
Dad, there are 231 people watching, but only 77 likes. Guys, give this stream a like. Come on, help us out here. Right, Dad?
Become members.
And become a member. Crazy Zoo Lady says, when the economy numbers are great, but people still think the economy sucks, which way does that turn the key? They said they're reading the book, but it's not that answer is not there.
I thought the answer was there at any rate. Obviously, the long-term economic key is just reading numbers produced by the government, real per capita GDP. The short-term economic key is a little trickier. obviously, if, as I say in the book, I do believe, if the National Industrial Conference Board declares a recession, then that key is turned. Or if you get 2 quarters of negative growth. I don't think either one of those is going to happen, although it could. You never know. But, we're already into February and the economy is roaring ahead. Now, the other point, maybe it wasn't as clear in the book as it could have, is if there is clear, overwhelming public perception that they're in a recession, that could turn the key. But that, I don't think, has ever happened independent of a call by the economists or 2 negative quarters.
Have you been following this whole Taylor Swift right-wing panic, Dad?
I love it. Here is the right wing screaming about cancel culture and free speech. The left wing is trying to cancel our voices. And what is the right wing trying to do? Cancel the voice of Taylor Swift. She is a private citizen. She has absolutely every right to politically advocate, to politically organize, to do whatever she wants to promote her favorite party and favorite candidate. No different than Donald Trump, who is also a private citizen and has the same rights.
Derek Taylor says, I know you don't like to do hypotheticals, but if the 2 economic keys hold up till September, Biden will be reelected, correct?
I'm not going to go out and say
no
that.
Hypotheticals.
If I say such a thing, as you know, everyone will say, Lichtman's predicted a Biden. Let me say this. It would certainly go a long way towards Biden's reelection if both economic keys hold. But there are still other keys that could fall. The 2 foreign policy keys, the third party key, social unrest could emerge at any time. So that wouldn't lock in Biden.
Our good friend, the Alex Treefire, asked, do you think Republicans block aid to Ukraine because they follow the keys and want to turn as many against Biden as possible?
I think that's part of it. I also think, unfortunately, the Republican Party is very inclined to authoritarianism. They admire authoritarians like Viktor Orban in Hungary. They invited him to their CPAC conference as an honored guest. And they've expressed Trump himself a lot of positive things about Putin. So I don't think they'd be really unhappy to see the Russians advance in Ukraine, and at the same time to pin a foreign policy failure on Biden.
What's your this is a bit of a random question, but what is your take on highway protesting?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I'm not sure I understand the question either. Like,
truckers blocking highways?
Oh yeah, people blocking highways.
I think it's a bad idea. It's too dangerous.
Too dangerous.
There are other ways to protest than blocking highways. That strikes me as a very dangerous proposition. I don't think I even did that in the 60s.
You were alive in the 60s?
Amazingly so. I know, it's hard to believe.
Blake Grisham asks, I know it's complex, but wouldn't Biden taking offense on the National Guard in Texas help him more than hurt him, even if it gets violent? Probably not.
Unless it turns a key, it doesn't matter. And the only key conceivably it could turn would be the social unrest key. And so I think the risks are higher than the rewards, strictly from a political point of view. I'm not commenting on the substance of what Biden should do, just the hard politics of it.
Oops. Joe Byron, right? That guy, right?
Joe Biden.
Oh, what did I say?
I thought you said Joe Biden.
Oh, good.
Is he on our stream?
Not that I can see, but he hasn't.
He should be.
He should
a lot.
Yeah, he should be. What do you think he's doing right now?
Sleeping.
You think he goes to bed at 9 o'clock?
I have no idea.
He might.
My guess would be they're still working out what they need to do in the Middle East.
Yeah. Mike DeNicola with the $10 donation. They say, thanks for showing the light, Allan. It's a shame that some Republican biased journalists posing as reporters are just using it as a means to attack Biden. I'm not sure what you're referring to, but thank you for the
I'm not
donation.
either.
And this next donation, I'm also not sure what they're saying. They say, "Can you link to a website for monitoring long-term economy key? And at what number does it need to be above in the summer for Biden to secure the key?"
It doesn't need to be above anything. It just needs to be not negative because he's so far ahead. And the real per capita GDP, you can look up the economic report of the president and it'll have it over time.
Could recent massive layoffs in the tech industry and various other industries point to a bad economy and possibly turn the economy key?
I'm not an economist. I don't think those layoffs will be enough to push the economy into recession. Overall, job creation has been very robust under Biden. In fact, far greater on a yearly basis than even the pre-pandemic record of Donald Trump.
Here's an interesting question. You often talk about Biden's lack of messaging, but why does it even matter if you say, quote, "voters aren't fooled by the tricks of the campaign"?
It's a great question. And messaging is important because you want voters to comprehend your accomplishments, which help secure the keys. The keys are based both on reality and on perception. And again, it's not just the presidential election. Messaging affects every other election. The Senate, the US House, state legislatures are all affected by the messaging, which comes from the top. A lot of the messaging that people get, even in these non-presidential elections, comes from the president.
If RFK wins one state, can he win the election?
Can he win the election with one state?
That's a strange question.
No, of course not. Oh, here's the puzzle. I said, RFK is so puzzling, as I said. I don't put much stock in the polls, but still, it's rather puzzling that Biden seems to do better when RFK Jr. is in the mix, that he does seem to pull more from Republicans than from Democrats, which may not be surprising given that he's best known as this big anti-vaxxer. And that's, of course, counterbalanced by the fact that he has, the most illustrious Democratic name pretty much you could have.
Harris is underrated, and I called her making it into high office well before she ran with Biden. You share my same theory for Gretchen Whitmer.
What about Gretchen Whitmer?
You think she's destined for greatness?
I think she is a star of the Democratic Party. I would not be shocked to see her run for the Democratic nomination in 2028. Even if Biden wins, he is obviously constitutionally barred from running again. If he loses, he'll likely be too old to run again anyway. So I think Whitmer will be a very strong contender for the Democratic nomination in 4 years.
Katie Jick, I'm not sure how to say that. Hello, is there a danger that Key 4 is flipped negative? Has the GOP transformed into MAGA? Therefore, it is now there, and therefore now is it independent, no longer the traditional opposition party?
It's a very deep question and a very short question. The short question is, yes, key number 4 could flip against the Democrats, but right now it's unclear. This is not the Republican Party. They've been talking for years about the MAGAs versus the mainstream. The MAGAs are the mainstream. Who's left of the so-called mainstream Republicans? They're virtually all gone.
Mitt Romney.
The Republican Party is in its mainstream now, the MAGA Party, which, by the way, is not all that different from where the party has been since the early 20th century. After all, if you go back to the 1920s, you had 3 very conservative presidents, and what did they do? They restricted immigration, they cut taxes for the wealthy, they deregulated business. They cracked down on homosexuality, on promiscuity, on obscenity. Not much different than what you see today. And there were, as today, very strong anti-Catholic, anti-Semitic, anti-Black sentiment within the party 100 years ago.
Could Johnson tank the economy with a shutdown?
It's possible. I don't think he's going to do it. We don't know whether shutting down the government would tank the economy, but it certainly could. It certainly wouldn't help, and it might be one way in which an otherwise robust economy plunges into recession. That's another reason why I'm not quite yet ready to say that key is secure, the short-term economy key for the incumbent Democrats.
Do you believe religious freedom in the First Amendment gives Christian bakers the right to deny making cakes for gay weddings? Sorry, just a random. I laugh because it's just a random question.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously don't. I don't believe the First Amendment gives you a right to discriminate. You can't say, back in the days of Jim Crow was justified by Christianity. A lot of Christian ministers were saying, the Bible, the word of God means the races should be separated. I don't believe religious freedom gives you the right to discriminate against people because of who they are.
Yeah, and I think most cases about that have gone to the Supreme Court that don't have some sort of loophole, usually you can't do that. You can't just say, I'm not baking you a cake because you're gay. I know there was a recent...
Or you're Black, or you're Jewish, right, or whatever.
There was a recent case...
characteristic is, you can always say, my religion, mitigates against it.
Yeah.
And, as you can find anything you want in the Bible to justify it.
Yeah, and I think the recent case that did go in favor of the person denying some sort of gay couple was something to do with they had some artistry loophole where like an artist can choose if they want to make an art or not.
Their creativity, they can choose how to exercise their creativity. I don't think that's right, but it's much more narrow than saying all you got to do is scream Christianity and you can deny whatever you want to people who are not heterosexual.
This is interesting. Teddy Roosevelt is the #1 champ with the keys. Who are the honorable mentions just below Roosevelt?
FDR would probably be the honorable mention. The other Roosevelt, the Democratic Roosevelt, would be. And then Ronald Reagan in 1984, down only 3 keys, would be another example of that.
Joshua D. asks, how are the social unrest and scandal keys looking as of today?
Well, again, these keys can change. They have not turned against the White House party as of today. They could. Republicans have been trying real hard to pin a scandal on Biden. I don't think they'll succeed, but we'll see how that plays out. And social unrest could emerge at any time. But
like social unrest between you and me. Wow, bow, 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 bow. Wow.
Sam, you're 3,000 miles away.
Oh.
You're not scaring me.
No, not 3,000, like 2,500.
All right. That'll do.
I'm going to combine 2 vice president questions. Who do you think will be Trump's VP, and will Ramaswamy if he picks Ramaswamy, will it increase Trump's chances of winning?
Trump would be insane to pick Ramaswamy, who's kind of a Trump, but even nuttier. He adds nothing and turns off people that even Trump might not turn off. There's really nothing redeeming about Ramaswamy that would help Trump as his VP. Obviously, there is no vice presidential key anyway, so it really doesn't affect the election. But what I always tell candidates and the media is, if you're picking a VP, pick someone who is qualified from day one to step in to the presidency. Ramaswamy would be about as far as you can get. He'd be, worse than Sarah Palin, probably the most panned vice presidential pick in modern American history. So, someone like a United States senator or Nikki Haley, who's been a governor and an ambassador, would qualify as a VP who could step into the presidency.
This was news from yesterday, apparently. What's your perspective on the potential Chinese hacking on U.S. infrastructure as reported by Director Wray, FBI Director Wray?
It frightens the hell out of me. Yeah, our infrastructure is very vulnerable. It's old. Apparently, you can get into a lot of the main infrastructure through attacking smaller, less well-protected sites. And it's a real serious problem that, I'm no expert about, as far as an expert on technology you can get, but it's something that the Biden administration needs to take very seriously and address. And I know China has disclaimed all this. They said they're not doing it. You take that for what it's worth.
Ross Goldberg asks, how and why did Teddy Roosevelt, FDR, and Reagan never lose the incumbent charisma key, but Obama did?
Because Obama did get caught in the Washington bubble. Teddy Roosevelt, Reagan, and FDR. Well, FDR and Teddy Roosevelt were kind of before the rise of the handlers and the consultants and the pollsters. And Reagan was just this extraordinary figure who followed his own muse. Remember, he had been an actor. He knew how to act. He knew how to appeal to the public and didn't have to listen to anybody.
Right. All right.
We'll get on for over an hour.
We'll start wrapping up here. We got 224 people watching. Please become a member, guys. It'll really help out the stream. And I think you'll really enjoy being part of this community. We'd love for you to be a member. Right, Dad?
Absolutely. We need to function. And as Sam said, for a month of viewing, it costs about what it takes to buy a candy bar. It's better for you than a candy bar.
Not quite a candy bar. Maybe, like I said, a fancier drink at
all right, fair
Starbucks.
Enough. If you get one of those big candy bars.
But don't forget, the stream is still free. You can watch and chat for free, right? So
you can ask questions for free. And don't forget, in addition to being a member, you can donate.
Ain't no doubt about it. All right, final. I'm going to pose 3 final questions to you.
One at a time.
Okay. Will the Fed be politicized and cave during the election?
Will the Fed be politicized? Of course. Every part of the government is politicized.
Do you think
everything the Fed does is going to be interpreted politically?
Do you think that Kamala Harris will crush it in her debate? Was she good last time? I don't even remember. Do you?
She did well. She did well. I don't remember the polling data, but I don't recall any problems in her debate last time. Pence is very good, though. He's a talk show host. I remember it was pretty close.
There's a clarification about a question about RFK Jr. that was asked earlier. They say, my question was, does RFK Jr. have charisma? Even if he is a third party, does that turn the charisma incumbent key?
I mean, the charisma challenger key.
Yeah.
It does not. That would only pertain to the major party challenger. And I do not believe that RFK Jr. has charisma. He doesn't have anything close to the kind of broad national appeal that Franklin Roosevelt or Ronald Reagan had.
All right, with that.
He's got a name. I think if his name was Sam Lichtman, he'd be polling at 2%.
What? Wait, he'd be doing worse?
Right.
How dare you? All right, I think with that, we will start to wrap it up. People are throwing in donations. You want to take these last couple questions?
Yes.
All right.
Sure. If it'll help get donations and members, even though I'm old and broken down, I'll go for more than an hour.
What can Biden do to turn around his hemorrhaging supporting Israel?
Support in Israel?
I guess his support of Israel is this person thinks it's hemorrhaging him. What can you do to turn this around?
Nothing he can do about that. He's between a rock and a hard place. He can't abandon Israel, but at the same time, what the Israelis are doing in Gaza is abysmal. And, all I can say is he's not the prime minister of Israel. This awful Netanyahu is. And he has leverage, but he doesn't have control. Netanyahu is not easily moved. And who are the big promoters of Netanyahu? Donald Trump and his allies, not Biden and the Democrats. It's shameful that Biden should be taking the heat for this.
With that, you have any final words for the people, Dad?
Yes. The big Supreme Court hearing on ballot disqualification is February 8th. So it's almost upon us. We'll talk about it in the next chat, but check it out. And that'll give you some clue as to how the justices may be deciding this critically important issue.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for watching. Good night.
Good night.